In the late 1940s, deep within the shadows of Soviet Russia, a horrifying experiment took place. 5 political prisoners, deemed enemies of the state, were subjected to an unthinkable test. Their mission: to stay awake for 30 days using an experimental gas stimulant. But what began as a scientific endeavor quickly descended into madness. The prisoners were sealed in a chamber, monitored through microphones and small glass windows. The room was stocked with books, cots, and enough food for a month. But there was one catch. The gas they were breathing was toxic in high concentrations. The researchers promised freedom in exchange for their compliance. But freedom was never the plan. For the first 5 days, everything seemed normal. The prisoners talked, read, and even joked. But soon their conversations took a dark turn. They began recounting traumatic events from their past, their voices growing paranoid and desperate. By day 5, they stopped talking to each other, whispering instead to the microphones and mirrors, convinced they could win the researchers' trust by betraying their fellow prisoners. On day 9, the first prisoner began screaming. He ran around the chamber, yelling for hours until his voice gave out. The others ignored him, continuing to whisper to the microphones. Then, the second prisoner started screaming. The remaining 2 tore pages from books, smeared them with their own feces, and calmly placed them on the glass windows. Silence followed. By day 14, the researchers grew desperate. No sounds came from the chamber, yet oxygen levels indicated all 5 were alive. Using the intercom, they announced they would open the chamber. To their shock, a calm voice replied, "We no longer want to be freed." At midnight on day 15, the chamber was open. What the soldiers found was beyond comprehension. 4 prisoners were still alive, but barely. The food was untouched. Instead, they had been feeding on their own flesh. Their bodies were mutilated, organs removed and laid out neatly. The soldiers screamed, and so did the prisoners, begging for the gas to be turned back on. The survivors were rushed to surgery. Despite massive injuries, they fought against sedation, begging to stay awake. One even wrote, "Keep cutting," as doctors tried to save him. The researchers were horrified. These men were no longer human. They were something else. In the end, the researchers faced an impossible choice. One soldier, driven to madness, shot the commander and the prisoners. As the last prisoner died, he whispered, "We are the madness that lurks within you all." What began as an experiment to test human endurance became a window into the darkest corners of the mind. The question remains, what happens when we push the limits of consciousness? And what horrors lie within us, waiting to be unleashed?